Are you ready to go on another ESCO Roadshow? Oh, I definitely am. This time we're headed to Zionsville, Indiana, to Fanimation, home of the Antique Fan Museum, where they have 150 years of fan and motor history. Man, doesn't that sound cool? So we're gonna go take a look at how fans have evolved and how motors have changed through time, and get a look at the V in HVAC, the ventilation side. Have a better understanding of where we came from so we know where we are going. So if you go to their website, fanimation.com, you'll see a bunch of highlights from the museum. And man, check out some of this stuff. So the museum has more than 2,000 antique ceiling and desk fans representing over 140 manufacturers, with some of the oldest electric desk fans going back into the 1890s. And check out some of this cool stuff, right? We're talking some of the oldest non-electric fans that were driven by steam, belt and pulley, water powered, some of this stuff going back into the 1880s. And this is the only dedicated antique ceiling and fan museum in the world that is open to the public. Such a cool opportunity. Yeah, check that stuff out. Anybody who knows me knows that I love antique machinery, and especially machinery that's related to our industry. You can imagine this being some of the first universal, tools. I think of some woodworking tools that are multi-purpose, one particular manufacturer, and reminds you a lot of this type of old technology. Here at the museum, you're going to find hundreds of different handheld fans featuring advertising from different manufacturers, retailers, even politicians and movie stars. Now, many of these fans are owned by private collectors that are members of the Antique Fan Collectors Association, but a lot of this is also from Tom's private collection. So there's a variety of collectors from around the country and around the world that host their fans, original and restored fans, here at the museum, so that the public can enjoy this massive collection of antique fans. I can't imagine there's anything even close to this anywhere else in the world. The Antique Fan Collectors Association has maintained a museum since 1997. This one was originally in Wichita, Kansas, and then it was moved here in 2009 into this new facility that's part of the Fanimation Custom Fan Company, which, if you don't know much about Fanimation, you gotta check that out as well. Oh, and did I forget to mention there's an entire second floor of what they consider more modern antique fans? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. Thank you everyone for joining the ESCO Roadshow, brought to you by the ESCO Institute. My name's Clifton Beck. I'm an HVAC industry professional, seasoned technician, educator, and a passionate admirer of the history of our industry. And I'm here today with Tom Frampton, president, founder of Fanimation, custom fans like I have never actually seen before. Amazing creations you've done. And the curator of the Antique Fan Museum, which is why we made this trip, to see a living history of fans. Because many times in the HVAC industry, we get focused on the things that we know and the things that we see on a daily basis. And we don't really compare it to other portions of the industry, and we should, because one thing that we see as technicians is the industry has made an evolution, particularly in the use of motors, and not everyone understands that evolution of motors has happened in our circulating and ventilating fans the same way. Yeah. Even further, you've seen more changes in fans than we've even seen in our own industry. When we look around and we dive into some of our fans, we see the complete history of electricity, which is really cool. To see equipment that actually operated on DC voltages. We have some functioning, living DC fans before our grid went to AC voltages. Right. So we had different DC voltages, we went to AC, we finally ended up with 120 volt AC along that way. And so we started with split phase motors, which in the HVAC industry, we've all seen split phase motors. And then over a period of time, fans made a transition into permanent split capacitor motors. Right. about the same time, we started seeing permanent split capacitor motors in blowers and in condenser fans. And as that evolved, we started seeing ECM, electronically commutated motors. And you've seen them in the circulating fan industry as well.
Correct.
I'd never really thought about that. So many times we see fans in motion and they're at a set speed, not realizing they may have been set by a variable speed controller. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit, Tom, about your history in the industry, because I hadn't realized how much creativity and art goes into custom fans. And after seeing the history and the lineage of fans, you can understand why. Right. There are some beautiful pieces of artwork that are functional, that are 150 years old.
Right.
So when did your passion for that begin?
Well, I got into the fan business really by accident. It was just a summer job in high school working for an antique dealer, and some of the things that we restored and resold, slot machines and things like that, but we also did some antique fans.
Okay.
Which led to some antique fan reproductions, which led to the Casablanca Fan Company.
So because of a lack of original parts, or just because of the interest in the designs?
This was in the 70s, and there was kind of a whole nostalgic movement in the 70s.
Okay.
From brass beds to oak frame.
Boy, that is true. You've seen a lot of reproduction
furniture,
home items.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was just
so it stirred
part
that
of
creative.
That. And what really fueled it was the energy crisis of the 70s.
Man, that makes so much sense. Sure.
So,
is that when you started seeing like permanent split capacitor motors being utilized in newer stuff?
They'd been around for quite some time.
Yeah. I know that's when we've seen a lot of it, because that energy crunch changed the way America looked at energy use in general. And we started looking at things from a different perspective.
Yeah. In the 70s, it really there wasn't a push for efficient motors for fans.
Okay.
It's just that running a fan versus AC was such a huge cost savings.
I gotcha.
The efficiency didn't come for quite a few years later for the motor itself.
Exactly. And it kind of happened with us. We've seen changes, but it wasn't a major push. What we've seen in, particularly in the residential HVAC and refrigeration industry, was by the 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, we started seeing a lot more ECM motor technology coming into play. Right. What time frame did you start seeing that?
Well, we actually experimented with it in the early 80s.
Really? Okay.
And set up a lab to do that, and we could not overcome the cogging.
Sure.
Which you take a motor and you stick blades on it, you might as well stick it on the head of a drum. The noise just radiates.
Absolutely.
We could not overcome it.
Okay. And we've seen that ourselves.
So that got shelved, and it was another 10, 15 years before others started.
Better controllers. And
right.
Absolutely.
And the cogging diminished till now you don't hear it today.
Exactly. And so anyone in the HVAC industry can, if you were around in that same time frame, you remember that our early circular blower wheel ECM motors had a lot of cogging on startup. And that was part of the reason we didn't adapt it as fast. It wasn't until later into the 2000s, and particularly in the last few years, as we've seen changes in federal fan efficiency regulations, has really made that shift into ECMs. Have you seen changes in regulations that have affected motors as well?
Well, they're not looking for a change in the motor per se. They want to see efficiency in terms of watts
wattage
per CFM.
Exactly. And that's really what drives our fan efficiency regulations. It's watts per CFM.
Right.
And it's interesting to see that how hand in hand our industries were cousins.
Right.
We move air. I mean, we're in the business of moving air.
Right.
Comfort cooling. And it's been around for, what I found interesting, much longer than I would have anticipated.
Right.
Upstairs, and you've got to come check this out. There's 2 floors, by the way. This is just one aspect of the history of our fans. Would you say thousands of years we've been moving air in some mechanical form?
We've been hot for a long time.
Exactly. So we think back about the history of it. It might have been the first human-powered palm leaf,
Right.
circulating air
Right,
for
it's just
comfort
like this,
cooling.
"Ooh, I'm hot," you know?
That's exactly it. We're moving air across the space, and you've got some really cool replicas of early technologies of mechanical ventilation, foot-powered ventilation, rocking-powered ventilation,
Water-powered.
water-powered ventilation, which was really interesting to see. So a lot of changes throughout history that all comes down to the movement of air and to comfort cooling. Do you see any changes in the industry going forward that will affect motors again? I think we're kind of at a plateau for a little
Yeah,
while.
I think we are. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah.
With ceiling fans as opposed to HVAC, you know, your equipment's hidden away. You don't see it.
Right. We don't
Whereas-
get the cosmetic ability that you get.
Yeah, it's got a, you know, no one's going to buy a fan if it's ugly.
Right.
Well, they might, but they're more apt to use a fan if,
Sure.
if it fits in with their design.
Exactly. And you have some beautiful fans and some of the most unique designs that I have ever seen. The only single prop fan I have ever encountered. Probably ever will. So if you get a chance to come to the Antique Fan Museum, it's not just the museum that's really cool. It's taking a look at the technology, the ingenuity, the creativity, because it's all came together in one place. And I highly recommend you coming by, learning more about the history of the industry of air circulation and comfort cooling. I really appreciate this. It's
Thank
been
you.
an eye-opener for me, Tom.
Great, thank you.
Boy, here's a good one for all of my IAQ friends. How about a 100-year-old ozonator? You'll also find a variety of more modern recreations of antique parts and antique-themed fans. I have to say, some of these home decorator fans from 100 years ago are probably my favorite. The restoration shop is actually a fully functioned machine shop where they do a lot of remodeling and recreating. And if you're into controls, there's a variety of components from original components from Edison, as well as one of the earlier ammeters that I have ever seen. Isn't that just a beautiful piece of machinery? They are everywhere you go in this building. Have some mechanical fans, and probably the earliest air conditioner that I have ever seen, operated by the evaporation of ice. Thank you for joining the ESCO Roadshow. We are so thankful that you took the time to hang out with us and go through a walk in time to see some of the living history of fans and motors and how they relate directly to the HVAC industry that we all know and love. See you next time on the ESCO Roadshow.
I'm Tom Terrific, great adventure lover. With mighty Manfred at my side, villains run for cover. I can be anything you see, change my shape most readily. How I do it puzzles me.